All right, welcome back to Jackass Politics, the show where we try to make sense of American politics without throwing our laptops through the window. Ian's out sick today, possibly from exposure to too much tariffs, but don't worry, I've got it covered, and we've got a good damn guest going on today. Today, I'm talking to Elijah Manley, who's running for Congress in Florida's 20th district. That's Broward County, so think Miami adjacent, where the humidity is high and the political drama is higher. So, Elijah is a former homeless teen, a substitute teacher, and now he's trying to shake up the system by going to Washington, which honestly might be the most Florida thing ever. Survives chaos, then go fix it yourself. So let's dive in before Ron DeSantis bans this podcast. So how you doing today, Elijah?
I'm doing fine, and I'm sorry to have you guys waiting. I'm running this morning from church to church, and as you can imagine, you can never really sneak out of a church without getting called out. So,
It's all good, man. So, while we get into your personal background and your motivations, so you've been a substitute teacher and organizer, and you face challenges like poverty and homelessness growing up in Florida's 20th. So, how have these experiences shaped your decision to run for Congress?
yeah, well, I'll start by saying I really didn't think I would be running for office or running for Congress. That's a really big step, and I was kind of enjoying the private citizen life a little bit, but a couple opportunities opened up. But growing up, I experienced childhood homelessness, sleeping out of my mom's car, showering at the beach before school. And it really kind of just opened my eyes to the inequalities that we see in the economy in this country, and that we don't really have a government that really works for working people. There were no services for me growing up. We really rely on really the charity of others, the charity of church groups, of nonprofit organizations, which are limited in what they could do. They only have so much funding. These shelters, they don't have a lot of funding, and so I thought, okay, what can I do about this? And I got involved at a young age in politics and organizing, so specifically around housing issues, education issues. And I made the decision to run for office. And it's so important to have folks who have the lived experience, who've experienced poverty, who've experienced homelessness in office, because we kind of see things different. We see the world differently, where we don't really see the statistics, the zeros, the ones when we're looking at the federal budget, for instance. We really see human lives because every cut to Medicaid, every cut to housing assistance, every cut to these programs that really help people, it really takes away a lifeline from someone who needs it. So, I mean, I'm running for Congress, and I think that my lived experience, going through this myself and seeing this firsthand makes me the best choice to go to Washington and kind of fix this crap that we're in right now.
So you've highlighted on your website that 17.1% of residents in your district are uninsured, largely due to the lack of Medicaid expansion. Can you elaborate on your plans to address this healthcare crisis?
Yeah, so a lot of it starts with this governor and this Republican Party we have in Florida, who, since I mean the Obama days, have refused to expand Medicaid in Florida. Um, I think it was at one point $1 billion, $3 billion that was offered to the state of Florida. Rick Scott turned it down. Ron DeSantis continues to turn it down. And now it's not being offered by Donald Trump. And those dollars affect people in District 20. We are the bluest congressional district, but we're also one of the poorest. 17.1%, like you said, of the folks in this district are uninsured. And so I strongly believe in a Medicare for all system. I believe that in the wealthiest country in the world, that we shouldn't have people uninsured. We have the wealth, the power, the money in our federal budget to ensure that everyone is covered. And so in Congress, I will co-sponsor Medicare for all if it's introduced in this upcoming Congress. And if it isn't, I'll introduce it. But I think healthcare, we're going to look at it a little bit more holistically. It's not just about Medicare for all. We want to make sure that people have access to the healthcare in their communities. A big issue we see here in District 20 and also in, throughout Florida is access to healthcare close to you. So, for example, in Broward County, where I'm at, there are a few hospitals, not too many, and they are out east or far out west. People in the central part of the county and the African American community, we have to go, if we have an emergency, we have to go all the way out west or all the way out east. I think that's ridiculous. I think we need more hospitals. We need more community health clinics for people so that they're not waiting in the ER forever, more urgent care facilities, more facilities for seniors to get health care. And so we got to be more holistic. I look forward to trying to get the funding that our communities need from the federal government. I think that's a crucial part of the job of a member of Congress.
So one of the problems we have here in North Carolina with being able to get more hospitals, we were just trying to. I'm a town commissioner here in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and we were supposed to be getting a new hospital opening up here. One of the problems we have here in North Carolina is that we go off of what's called certificate of need. Basically, there's a certain amount of beds that they allow per year, and hospitals have to apply for them. Right? Do y'all have a similar system in Florida?
I'm not sure. I'm not so sure about that. I know that there are a specific number of beds, and I know that for example, our Broward Health hospital system, which is our public hospital system right now, they are, making attempts to, add more beds. But they're limited. The funding's limited as well, and because it's a public hospital, it relies on taxpayer dollars, and then maybe some charity from, some wealthy people. But another part of this problem is rural communities not having access to healthcare as well, or to those health facilities. My district is part urban, part rural. We take in a big chunk of the Everglades. For some reason, there's 2,000 people living in the Everglades National Park. And all throughout Florida, there are people in rural communities who they're getting these high ambulance bills, or they have to be flown out by helicopter to a hospital because they're in the middle of nowhere. And so I think we need to do something about that as well.
Sure. So Ian and I on the show, and sorry Ian wasn't able to be with us today, but we are a little more center left, and we have talked about a lot in the past of going to a single payer healthcare system. Uh, how would you to explain to our audience the difference between a Medicare for all system and a true single payer system, or is there any difference to you?
Um, I think Medicare for all can be a single payer system. It depends on, I mean, I know there's so many different models. I mean, you have Bernie Sanders model, you have Elizabeth Warren model, which keeps, maybe the private sector in place, so private insurance. But I try to contrast it with the NHS in the UK. Uh, for me, I don't believe that there should be private insurance, but I understand there might need to be some compromise on that in Congress. So, I will be one person out of 435 people in the House, or 535 people in Congress. So, I understand there might be a compromise that need to be made on this. But for me, I don't believe in private health insurance. I think that this shouldn't be a commodity, that this should be guaranteed to all people. But single payer really is that single payer. The government is paying for it. You go to any doctor you want, you go to any dentist you want, any healthcare provider that you want. You don't have to worry about taking money out of your pocket. You present your card, Medicare, and it's paid for. And you don't have to deal with the middleman, the insurance company. Okay, I went to the doctor to get an MRI, and now my insurance company needs to decide how much they're going to pay, and maybe I get subsidies from the government, and the government's paying part of it and I'm paying part of it. No more of these multiple payers. It's just the government paying for it. You get the care that you need from the doctor.
So I went to school for political science, and I wrote my capstone paper on about what is the best healthcare system in the world. And one of the best systems in the world is Germany. And one thing I'd encourage you to look at is I know you said you don't like the idea of private insurance. My Where I've landed at on it through all my research is actually having a public having the private sector step in to be able to offer like higher tiers, right? Like everybody gets the single payer, and where you end up getting the private market coming in is like, let's say you want your own private room, or you want like higher level services or stuff like that, right? That's where that type of level of insurance could kick in. That might be something to kind of look into, because at that rate, then you're not completely just putting out like all these private insurance companies as well, right? And it's a way to be able to offer an additional sector to our private sector. Do you have any comments on that?
Oh, I will have to look at it. I mean, it sounds interesting. I mean, as long as we have a system, a Medicare for all system, and everyone has that base coverage, I think that's something worth looking into.
Sure. Because I agree with you. I mean, our healthcare is not a true market, right? Like I'm a firm believer in supply and demand, and letting markets kind of take over things. However, I don't think anybody's ever going to like break their leg and pull up their cell phone and be like, all right, where's the cheapest I can get this fixed, right? Like it's not a true uh market, right? Nobody's saying I want to go to the cheapest doctor, right? Nobody's going to ever make that argument, right? So it's you know I definitely think we need to have some total overhaul change there. And I mean, if you even look, Shane Gillis had a clip just go viral this past week where he was talking about private health care and stuff with his dad, and he's like, why is it that everybody in the world has the government health care except for us, right? Like obviously none of these folks are trying to get rid of their system, so why is it so bad, right? And he's kind of more red coded, comedian and stuff. So I do think that healthcare could absolutely be a winning message for us. It got Obama, in the office the first time. It's just one of my biggest concerns with it, and I would see how you would address this, is that we just saw what Doge and their Elon Musk and their teams did. My biggest concern with this, and obviously me being a proponent of single payer, I've thought about how to get around this myself, is how do we prevent the Republicans from fucking this up, where when they get into office and they just start, they want to make healthcare or just government in general appear to be not working, right? So that they can privatize everything. So how do you install safeguards to prevent them from just coming in and gumming up all the works and making it where this doesn't work for people any longer?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I've thought about that too. We have a Medicare for all system, and then they just come in and gut, gut Medicare. So it's a very valid question. I think for a system like that, and I also think this for Social Security as well, that we need to amend the Constitution. We need to make sure that we put these programs into the Constitution so that they can't do this. I know in Florida, for example, when we make big changes to things, we do it through constitutional amendments on our ballot, so that really the government, they still try to find a way around it because that's what Republicans do, but it makes it much more difficult for the legislature or the governor to do that. I think we might need to amend the Constitution to make some changes. And I think Social Security should be your constitutional right. I think healthcare should be a constitutional right. And when we do that, it makes it much more difficult for them to just repeal a law or have a billionaire buddy come in and destroy the program. And I think there's some other things we can do as well. I mean, I know Republicans talk about, having, the state come in and do this and do that. And I think, communities and some states need to kind of step up and do their part as well. If we're not getting single payer on a national level, I think the states can kind of do their thing as well. And I think that's a thing to look at as well.
Got it. Changing gears a little bit, at 26, you're aiming to become one of the youngest members of Congress. So, how do you plan to engage younger constituents and address issues that resonate with them?
Good question. Yes, so our district, the median age is 41.1 years old. And it's a lot of people are moving here to South Florida. They're moving from all over the country. They want the tropical feel, the sunlight, the hurricanes that come with it. But we have a lot of young families moving here, and I think what a lot of folks here are very concerned about is the cost of living and affordability. And so I think every time I talk to a younger voter, that's what I'm hearing: affordability. I want to be able to buy a house. I want to be able to afford the rent, and I want to be able to afford to live here in South Florida. And that's just kind of recurring issue after recurring issue is the housing. And that's why I care so deeply about it, in addition to my lived experience with it. But engaging young people, letting them know that really the power is in your hand. If we turn out in large numbers, we can really elect anybody if we want. We can we can really change the show in 2028. We can really dominate the midterms if Gen Z and millennials and Gen Xers. I know a lot of people like to ignore Gen X, but they're still young. They're still young. But we can really control the narrative and really take over the midterms in 2026. And so my job is to make that happen. In Broward County, we really don't have strong infrastructure in Broward and Palm Beach and South Florida in general. We don't have strong organizing infrastructure. It's just kind of machine politics. Someone gets in office, they're there and whatever. We don't really have people engaging people year round. And so what I want to do is not just focus on, I get elected and I win my election and that's it, disappear and come back in 2 years, but that year round organizing that we don't see in South Florida. Everyone asks me the question of why Democrats keep losing in Florida. It's because we don't engage people year round. We come up election year, we say Republicans are bad, vote for us if you care about this. If you don't, well, we're gone, whatever. But we don't really engage people. And so it's the same principle with young people. You have to engage year round. Don't just show up during election time. And so I want to organize in the community. I've been doing this already outside of politics, outside of elections. And I want to continue to do that when I'm in office, showing up, being visible, getting people registered to vote, getting people engaged with the process. That's so important. Having the town halls, making sure people understand, why it's important to be involved in this process, especially our young people who may not be as engaged.
So one of the problems that we saw in the last election is that we are losing young men to the Republican Party at a great clip. That's one of the reasons why Ian and I did start this podcast, is because we saw that there is a giant missing sector that we have just overlooked in podcasts and online media and stuff like that. What do you think that the Democratic Party needs to do to be able to get young men back?
It starts by showing up and talking to young men and caring about the young men's lives. I mean, the Democratic Party isn't listening. And there was this big narrative last year about, young black men not coming out to vote, which wasn't exactly fully true because we really did come out, just not in the numbers they expected. And a lot of people stayed home. And, there's so much rhetoric online. I see people say, young men are going conservative over this and over that. And I try to tell people it really does come down to the economics. And that's what I hear from people in my community, from young black men, from a diverse set of people. It comes down to the economics. A lot of people are falling for the Republican lie that Democrats are bad on the economy, that Republicans are good for the economy, which we see right now isn't the case. But people are falling for it because the rhetoric and the narrative that Republicans are able to say, they tell a good story. They tell a really good story. I don't fall for it. You don't fall for it. But they tell a really good story to young men that when they get in office, they're going to give everyone, the young men, a job and a girlfriend and this and that and the other thing. And it's the Democrats and the liberals and, women who are the problem. And we don't really have a counter narrative as Democrats. We know it's not true. We know that we're really the party that cares about young men, but we don't really have a counter narrative. And I think really it starts by showing up and listening. Um, I feel like a lot of people just feel like the Democratic Party is turning on men and telling them they don't matter, and that it's feminism and all of this stuff. And I am a feminist, so I don't have a problem with feminism at all. And I think as long as we let the Republicans control the media environment and say these lies without us combating them, it's going to continue. Men are going to continue to turn away from the Democratic Party and not necessarily just go to the Republican Party, but stay home. A lot of people are just staying home and disengaging from the political system entirely. They're disgusted by what they see in both parties. One party is, telling them, we're going to do all of this stuff and we're going to have this great American comeback. The other party is like, whatever. I don't care about men and men issues. And, part of, a men issue we can talk about is healthcare. Healthcare does impact men. I mean, in the black community, cancer, colon cancer, big thing, pancreatic cancer, big thing, black men's health. Those are big issues. And then Kamala Harris did talk about that, surprisingly enough. But the party apparatus doesn't make these things issues, and I think a lot of people feel like, okay, well, we talk about abortion a lot and we talk about, LGBTQ rights a lot, but we're not talking about, men's health. And there's room to talk about everything. There's room to make all of these issues part of the Democratic platform.
Gotcha. So you are running in a primary, correct?
Yes.
Who's your opponent?
My opponent is like Congresswoman Sheila Shurflis McCormick, who's currently facing quite a bit of scandals on her.
Yeah, she's currently under House Ethics Committee investigation. So, how do you differentiate yourself from her, and what do you offer that she doesn't?
I'll start by saying that I am not a millionaire healthcare CEO. I didn't take $5.8 million from the taxpayers when we were struggling with COVID. Her healthcare company took an overpayment of almost $6 million from the state. Instead of using that money in our community to provide the vaccines that she was supposed to, she took that money illegally and ran for Congress with it. So that's one big distinction is I would never do something as silly as that. I'm not a healthcare CEO. I'm somebody who really cares about this community. I live here, I work here, I understand the people, I'm in the community. And Sheila Shurflis McCormick is somebody who got in office, who promised change, who promised everyone $1,000 a month every month for the rest of their lives. If she got into Congress, vote for me and I'll give you $1,000 a month. She failed on that. That was a promise she couldn't have delivered on. It was impossible to deliver on something as big as that. She lied to the people, but I'm not really going to focus on her. She has her own ethics issues and investigations that will materialize over the next year, but I'm focused on the people here. And while our Congresswoman spends all of the time in Washington and never really in the community, the people here in District 20 are struggling to put food on the table. No one's talking about the issues that they're affecting when it comes to the housing crisis with affordability, the prices of groceries going up. And while we have a fly by night Congresswoman who's in DC 90% of the time and not in the district, people are wondering where is their representative?
Gotcha. So, you did bring up housing affordability. That's a big thing that we've been talking about a lot recently on the show. Did you read Abundance yet?
Did I read which one?
Abundance by Ezra Klein.
I haven't actually. You're not the first person to tell me to read that book.
Well, I'll give you the gist. Basically, it's we need to build a lot more houses and we need to remove the barriers to building a lot more houses. What would be your strategy for fixing um, the housing crisis that we're facing right now, housing affordability crisis?
Yeah, so I mean, I can go on forever about this one.
Please.
I serve on the downtown Fort Lauderdale Civic Association, and so I deal with developers all the time, and our downtown development authority, and these organizations. And I can tell you that the one thing I hear from people is it just needs to be some reform when it comes to zoning. Cities have these zoning restrictions in place. You can't build this big, this you can't build taller than this. You can't do this. You can't do that. And so I do believe in some upzoning in some communities. I know not everyone in my district will agree with me. I might lose a couple votes for saying that, but my district is like 90%, 95% suburban. I mean, it's just suburbs. It's endless
Right.
rows of housing. I mean, that costs the cities that costs cities so much money, these suburbs.
Sure.
And so I
Sure.
think we need to move more to the mixed use zoning. Um, I see a lot of these mid rises popping up in town. I think it's an incredible thing. I mean, single family homes. I mean, they're great, but they're not the future. The future are going to be these apartment buildings and these mid rises we're seeing, this communal living. And I think we need to see more of that. More units, more people are moving here. We need more units. And so I think one of the solutions or one of the things we can do is build more. Really, it's really that simple. Build more, build up.
Yeah. I mean, Kamala had she wanted to build 3 million homes, right?
Yep.
Um, and the problem that I've landed on is that I'm in Wake Forest is a suburb of Raleigh. And Raleigh is one of our fastest growing cities in the nation. Kind of where I've landed at on this is that to be able to solve the housing affordability crisis, we need cities like, Raleigh, Miami, New York, LA. Those are the ones that need to be growing, taller, a lot denser. If you want the single family, that's why people do move into the suburbs. They do want the single family homes, right? However, in your suburbs, you do need to still have more homes at all different price points, right? So you do need to give your your developers the option of being able to build more densely, especially in your urban cores. So around where your public transportation goes. So it's a fine line to walk there. Of determining where you know single family homes work best, but if you constantly just have single family homes, you're going to have urban sprawl. Here, I'm not sure around where you're at, but in our suburbs, it's the loss of trees, the loss of farms. If you want to be able to not have those things happening, you need to build more densely. And that comes along with you know the talk of infrastructure, right? You need to be able to have your infrastructure in place too. Um, one of the things that I don't hear anybody talking about in either party is that our highway fund, the federal highway fund, runs out in, I think it's 2026 or 2027. Uh, so, I would encourage you, if you don't have a plan, definitely take a look at how do we fund our nation's infrastructure. We got there was a study from I think it was Goldman Sachs or BlackRock or something that came out last week that basically said that by 2040, our investment that we need to be able to have taken place in all our infrastructure is equivalent to doing the um, the the National Highway Plan that Eisenhower instituted basically every 2 weeks. So our our infrastructure needs are massive, and we are incredibly behind on that. Have you thought of any plans on anything on dealing with infrastructure at all?
Yeah, I, I mean, we passed this one bill, and I just don't know where that money went. I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, I look around here, these cities say, "Oh wow, we got all of this money from the bipartisan infrastructure, funding," and I really don't see it was they used it for whatever they wanted, and so there needs to be, stronger regulations on that, on how they spend this money. But we definitely do need investment in our infrastructure because that really is one of the thresholds for where people live too. The roads that they're driving on, the transportation networks that we build. And so, I mean, federally, there's a lot more we could be doing, and it's probably going to be in the trillions of dollars. And of course, you're going to have one party that doesn't want to spend it, and then folks in our own party that don't want to think and work harder and do more. But you're exactly right. I mean, the roads that we're driving on are horrible. The highway systems need some touch ups. Or we need more transportation options, trains and rail lines that need to be put down to connect people all over the place. Because public transportation, we don't really have good systems, and it's not just going to be the buses. We need rail. Um,
Sure.
and we need strong rail. We need national rail. And I support having a national rail system that connects all of the states. And I know that is very expensive, but that's something we should have. And all these other countries in the world are figuring it out. And we still don't have a national rail system. We have like Amtrak. And it's like, okay, well, it's an attempt in the right direction, but we should be doing a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, to give you an idea how expensive it is, the federal government under Pete Buttigieg actually came in and is trying to get passenger rail service, commuter rail, from Wake Forest to Raleigh, which, I mean, it's really not that far. And the cost just to do that, to purchase all the land and everything, was around $1 billion. And then we had 14 million dedicated just to building one of our transit hubs. So, it is an expensive process, but also part of why that is expensive, and this is one of the things they talk about a lot in abundance, and it goes back to your point of that we had this giant, massive infrastructure bill and we didn't see a lot of infrastructure come from it, is because we're spending a lot of time doing environmental reviews and stuff like that. And environmental, the environmental movement is it had its purposes. It definitely prevented us from having acid rain and like the Cuyahoga River catching on fire every 3 years. Like it had its purposes and it did great things. We now need to figure out how to go back to building things, right? Like we need to figure out how that we can not only be safe for our workers, but also, have environmental concerns, but still we need to have progress, right? China is putting down high speed rail faster than anybody in the world. Now, I'm not saying we want to be able to have the same level that they are, because they're probably not caring about their workers, they're probably not caring about the environment, but you got places like California where they've been studying. Jerry Brown in his first term in 1980, I think it was, talked about getting high speed rail in California, and they have only built like maybe 300 yards or something the last I checked on it of rail. That is not something that we can have happening, right? So if we do have these infrastructure bills put in place, we need to have things. One of the policies that I'm really I like to promote is having shot clocks on our environmental reviews, right? So that if they don't get their environmental reviews done in time enough, it's going to be an automatic approval, but also that triggers other things. Like, we don't want to have that just people gaming the system, but that it staffs up the environmental reviews, ability to do things. So getting them more staff, figure out where the pain points are, get those pain points pushed through, but also allow us to get things done. Josh Shapiro, back when the I-95 bridge collapsed, and he was able to get it done in the matter of a couple weeks. We need in our blue cities to be working, and in our blue states be working at getting things done like that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
and touch on it too. A lot of it, it's it's the studies, and a lot of the problem is some of these elected officials, and I mean, I've seen it all throughout South Florida as well. They want to pay a firm and have a firm study this, study that, design a nice fancy thing, and it takes a year. And meanwhile, the inflation is running, and the cost of actually doing a project is increasing. And so while they are sitting up there paying, this firm, and then they fire this firm, and they want to bring in another firm, or, now the residents are upset. You have two sets of residents, arguing about it, what they want and what they don't want. And now this commissioner wants, to do a study, and this commissioner wants to do their own study. And then each study costs $900,000. And meanwhile, the project never gets done, and it eventually gets scrapped. And we see this happen. And, I'm in Fort Lauderdale, and we're having this fight right now over, bridge versus tunnel. They want to build a bridge through the downtown. Our mayor wants it to be a tunnel because we have a marine industry here, and it will, in our marine industry is bringing in billions of dollars a year, and so the marine industry would be affected by the bridge. And so it's been a back and forth between the county. The county is like, I don't care what the residents say. I want to build the bridge. It's cheaper. The cities wants the tunnel under the river, and so it's back and forth, back and forth. The cost is going to end up going up because there's no resolution. And so there needs to be a cap on these things. And then now, while they're doing that, the city is doing a study, the county wants to do their own study, and they all have to be on the same page for DOT to say, okay, we're okay with this, or we're going to provide funding, and they're not. And so there needs to be some regulation on the timing for these processes, because there's phases that take forever. And meanwhile, you're not actually laying the tracks down. You're not actually building. You're not actually doing anything, because for 6 to 10 years you've been studying and arguing and fighting. And so that's part of the reason why infrastructure never gets done, is too much infighting. Everyone wants to do this their way and that way. And I mean, I'm all for there being regulation, but it needs to be sensible. It can't just be, we're going to do an environmental study for 4 years and nothing gets done. And then you fire the firm and you hire another firm and you're back in the same place.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think we'll agree there. So, moving on to the next topic, given the recent special election outcomes and the current political environment, what do you believe the Democratic Party should focus on to regain and maintain voter trust?
Yeah, I've heard so much about the special elections in Florida. Everyone is asking me about it, and I mean, it was an overperformance. I will say that. I mean, I wasn't expecting them to win. I'll be honest. This is R plus 30 district. One of them was R plus 50 district. It was going to go red no matter what. That's like a Republican winning my district. That's not going to happen. It's
Right.
impossible. I can go to sleep and wake up, in a general election, the day after the election is still win. Um, but I think part of what the Democratic Party needs to do is start showing up, and not just show up during election time. I know people say that all the time, but it's so true. We need to compete in Spanish media market. In South Florida, as you can imagine, there's a lot of Spanish radio here, and there's a lot of propaganda on there, and there's no left wing presence there, no Democratic Party presence there, no Democratic Party is Spanish outreach, and we're not doing that. But also to gain the voters' trust back, I think we need to go down the populist route. And populism works. It's been working for the Republicans. There's a need for it in the Democratic Party. Our voters are, yearning for something new, different. And I think Bernie Sanders style populism is on the rise. I mean, when I'm doing my call time and I'm talking to even wealthy people, I'm hearing them saying stuff like they want a Bernie Sanders style figure. And I'm looking at their giving history and I'm like, wow, this person is not even a Bernie Sanders Democrat. And they're saying, they want to see more populist rhetoric from the Democratic Party. I think people are just kind of upset with the status quo. They're upset with Wall Street. They're upset with the billionaires controlling everything in the country. And in order for us to gain the trust of the people, I think we need to start listening to the people.
Cool.
So
So running a campaign is no small feat. What obstacles have you encountered so far, and how are you navigating them?
yeah, I mean, I would say the biggest obstacle for me is being a working class candidate because you kind of have to like give up work and you have to focus on campaigning full time, and that's been tough. There's a lot of millionaires that run for office and are able to self fund. My opponent did that with the ill-gotten gains. Some people are just wealthy and they write themselves a check and there you go. They have a campaign. For me, it's been tough doing it. I mean, I think I've done a good job. We raised almost $300,000 in our first quarter from 11,000 people, um, leading the whole pack. Everyone else is at zero. But it's been challenging because I have bills. Obviously, I work. I have to make sure I pay the bills. I have to make sure I have health insurance and keep food on the table. And so that's been a struggle. But I find joy in it too. I meet incredible people in the district. I have incredible conversations that keeps me going. It keeps me accountable. I got into this not for myself, but for the people that I'm seeking to represent. So I got in it for a reason, and that keeps me going.
Cool. Um, so where do you see Florida's 20th district in the next 5 years, and how does your platform aim to get it there?
So I see a Florida 20 that's similar to a New York 14 or to a Florida 10, where the people are engaged. They're engaged. They like their representative. They know what's going on. And part of the problem we have in District 20 is it's such a big district. It's, I think, one of the largest districts by landmass, or almost. It's 2,400 square miles. Um, it's almost a million people in the district. You have two counties in the district. You have Broward and Palm Beach. People just don't know what's going on, and our congresswoman isn't engaging them. I look at and I compare that to Maxwell Frost, for example. He's very visible in his district. People like him there. They have infrastructure, organizing infrastructure there. They have town halls. People are so engaged in the process. They can just walk down the street and see Maxwell Frost, and they're like, "Oh, they're going to congressman." So I envision a Florida 20 where we have town halls, and my opponent hasn't been having real town halls. It's these fake town halls that she's been having where, they vet your questions ahead of time, and it's all government people in there, and people don't have no clue what's going on, and no one's talking to them. No one cares. And so it can't just be about the politics. It also has to be about community service. And part of what I want to do over my first few terms in office and beyond is engage in community service. Um, Maybe someone needs, their lawn cut. Maybe we need a program to help seniors go grocery shopping. Maybe we need programs on to do community cleanups. People need to see what their government is doing and what their elected officials are doing. And when people think of Washington and Congress, they think of, okay, they get on a plane, they fly up there twice a week, they come back, they hold a little town hall, and they go away, and they come back for a vote, every 2 years. I don't want that to be Florida 20's destiny. I want it to be where we're doing stuff in the community year round. And so part of my platform is over the next year and a half is to do that. is to do programs to help seniors, to help folks who, and part of that is this fellowship program that I'm going to be launching soon, and to bring people into the process and do community service.
Cool. So for our listeners who are inspired by your message, how can they support your campaign or get involved?
Well, visit my website, ElijahManley.com. You can donate. You can sign up to join a fellowship program that's going to be launched soon. But stay engaged with the process, and that starts by signing up and being on my email list. Um, it really does. It really does help if you donate. But again, this isn't about donations. This is about staying engaged with the process. We try to keep people updated with what's going on in District 20. But yeah, follow me on social media as well if you like what you're hearing. I talk a lot. I'm on there all the time. So feel free to shoot me a DM too if you have a question.
Cool. Well, Elijah, thanks for joining us today and sharing your vision for Florida's 20th. For our listeners, if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, share, comment, and review Jackass Politics.